Breaking news. Putin has sacrificed low-budget global reach for domestic security since Prigozhin's death. On Friday, a Kremlin spokesman called claims that Russian President Vladimir Putin was responsible for the plane crash on Wednesday that killed Yevgeny Prigozhin, a complete lie. A former high-ranking Russian government official, however, told Insider a different story. They concluded that the uprising was an anomaly. But the results were inescapable. That is to say, the collision was not a random occurrence. The march of Prigozhin's Wagner Group mercenaries towards Moscow was the inevitable consequence of his disobedience. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who discovered Prigozhin when he was operating a chain of St. Petersburg restaurants, turned him into one of Russia's most feared power brokers, involved in the trafficking of weapons, gold, and armed men across 3 continents. The march was a stunningly open challenge to Putin's authority. The former Kremlin official Prigozhin scoffed at the notion that his untimely death was a surprise. They wrote, "His death could not have been better timed. Chekhov's gun was his destiny. After his shot went off, all he could do was watch as the curtain went up and the show went on without him." Chekhov's gun was cited to illustrate the official's point that any private military force that refused to fall under Putin's direct control would be destroyed. One of the great contributions of Russian literature to global culture is the famous storytelling principle that a gun hanging innocently on the wall in the first act of a play will be fired in the third act. But a cache of internal files that exposed the inner workings of Prigozhin's corporate empire in the months before his death also tell the story of his rise and fall. There were dozens of spreadsheets in those files that broke down how the Wagner Group spent its money under Prigozhin's leadership. A Nigerian gig worker can make $276 USD per month pushing Kremlin memes through a troll farm. $791 is the cost of fuel to illuminate a historic hilltop sign in the Central African Republic. The worldwide marketing budget for Tourist, a film about heroic Russian mercenaries who save an African government from local bandits and European elites, was 29 million rubles, or about $300,000. This included advertisements on TikTok, YouTube, and Google. Those documents were stolen from the Wagner Group by unknown hackers. They demonstrate why Prigozhin was so helpful to Russian President Vladimir Putin in a variety of covert campaigns, including the invasion of Ukraine and the expansion of Russian influence in the Middle East and Africa. A bloodthirsty warlord, Prigozhin was an ex-convict and restaurateur in St. Petersburg who had taken the brutal logic he had learned during his years in the Russian prison system to the global stage. We reviewed evidence of Wagner troops engaging in rape, beheadings, and other war crimes. But the spreadsheets revealed Prigozhin's hidden talents. He was a cunning and bloodthirsty warlord with an eye for profit. When compared to what Americans or Europeans would have spent on equivalent overseas operations, the sums we saw carefully accounted for in the Wagner Group's monthly budgets and expense reports were laughable. Naturally, plundering and blackmailing helped supplement that cash flow. Prigozhin's shakedown letter to the Syrian government, demanding oil revenue from territory retaken from ISIS, was among the documents found. While the Wagner Group is used by Russia to increase its military might, it is not at all like a regular army or diplomatic service. Wagner is often characterized as a private military company, mercenaries, but their brutal tactics, semi-official standing, and hunger for resource extraction place them more closely to privateers of the 16th century. As long as Prigozhin remained loyal to Putin, he was the ideal tool for boosting Russia's superpower status despite the fact that Russia's economy is only a tenth as large as China's or the United States. The 2 months that passed between Prigozhin's march on Moscow and the explosion on his private plane left room for hope that he had become so indispensable to Putin as to merit forgiveness. Prigozhin's tendency to publicly criticize the Kremlin's favorite generals on social media for poor strategy and supply issues in Ukraine was something Putin had already shown remarkable tolerance for. The death of Prigozhin suggests that Putin has sacrificed Russia's global ambitions for the sake of maintaining his own regime's stability. He would love to have both, of course. Prigozhin continued to antagonize the Kremlin by refusing to fade into the background, and new reporting by The Wall Street Journal shows how vigorously Putin was attempting to supplant Prigozhin's authority during his final weeks of life, maintaining Wagner's African shadow empire while centralizing control. After the uprising, the Russian government retaliated by conducting raids on Wagner's offices, cutting off their access to social media, and publishing photos of Prigozhin's opulent apartment, which were reportedly filled with cash, gold, and firearms. However, despite the fact that Prigozhin and his Wagner minions had killed about 15 Russian service members during their failed march on Moscow, no criminal charges were brought against them. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, who fancied himself a peacemaker between Putin and Prigozhin, was among those who took heart from this. Putin, however, seems to have been too busy plotting his revenge by incorporating the Wagner Empire into the Russian state. Reports indicate that the Russian Ministry of Defense sent emissaries to the foreign governments that Wagner had been supporting, informing them that they should resume dialogue with the Kremlin directly. The GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency, may succeed Wagner in Africa, according to some reports. It will take years for whoever does it to reconstruct Prigozhin's complex network of bribery, propaganda, and fear on a country-by-country basis. Insiders spoke with retired U.S. intelligence chief General James Clapper, who said the apparent decision to kill Prigozhin was predictable given the general's priorities. Putin, as usual, has put his own ego, reputation, and power ahead of everything else, as Clapper pointed out in an email. I don't think he even considered doing anything overseas. If I had to guess, I'd say that another strongman will succeed Putin in Russia. It's the same old thing.